HOA Karen threatened my son's car. It's a military vehicle. My son had just come home after a long deployment. He was proud of his service, proud of the vehicle he drove, and proud of the uniform he wore. That car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was a piece of his identity, a symbol of everything he had been through and survived. But one woman in our neighborhood didn't see it that way. To her, it wasn't a car. It was a problem. From the very first day my son parked his military vehicle in front of our house, the storm began. It started small, like a whisper carried in the wind. A few disapproving looks, a muttered comment here and there. But then it grew louder. Suddenly, the quiet peace of our neighborhood turned into a battleground, and the general on the other side wasn't wearing stars or stripes. She was wearing yoga pants, a sun hat, and a permanent scowl. Her name? Karen. Karen didn't like the sight of my son's car. She didn't care that he had served his country. She didn't care about the sacrifices he'd made or the long nights he had spent awake in dangerous places, just so people like her could sleep safely in their comfortable homes. No, she only cared about one thing, the look of the neighborhood. And according to her, my son's vehicle ruined it. She showed up at my door one morning, her arms crossed, her face tight with anger, and her voice sharp like broken glass. "That thing," she said, pointing at my son's car, "doesn't belong here." I stared at her, not even sure if I had heard her right. I asked her what she meant, and she doubled down. This is a family neighborhood. We don't need military trucks making us look like a war zone. At that moment, something inside me boiled. My son had risked his life overseas, had endured sandstorms, bullets, and sleepless nights. And now, back home, he was being disrespected on his own street. Not by strangers, but by a neighbor who thought her opinion was law. I wanted to shout, but I stayed calm, because I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. And oh, was I right. Within days, Karen took her crusade to the Homeowners Association, the HOA. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know they can be a nightmare. A little bit of power in the wrong hands becomes a weapon. And when Karen got in front of them, she turned my son's car into a personal war. She claimed it was an eyesore. She said it brought down property values. She even tried to suggest it was unsafe. Unsafe? My son's vehicle had been inspected by the military itself. It was built to protect, to endure, to survive. And yet, Karen twisted it into something ugly. The HOA, of course, listened to her complaints. After all, she was loud, she was persistent, and she was manipulative. Suddenly, we started getting letters. The first letter said we had a non-compliant vehicle on our property. The second threatened fines. And the third one hit harder. It warned that if we didn't remove the vehicle, legal action could be taken. Imagine the sting of that moment. My son had just come home from serving his country, finally ready to rest, finally ready to feel safe, and instead he was greeted with threats. Not from enemies abroad, but from neighbors at home. I watched him that evening as he stood by his vehicle. He didn't say much, but I could see it in his eyes. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was memories of the brothers he served with. It was nights spent guarding the desert. It was a smell of sand, oil, and adrenaline. And now, it was being treated like trash. But let me tell you something. My son didn't break down. He didn't crumble. He looked at me and said, "Dad, I fought for freedom, and I'm not about to lose mine here." That's when I knew we weren't just going to take this fight lying down. Karen thought she had power because she had the HOA on her side. She thought her letters, threats, and complaints would scare us. But what she didn't know was this. When you push a soldier, you don't get weakness. You get resistance. And when you disrespect a family that's already sacrificed everything, you wake up a fire you can't control. So we started documenting everything. Every letter, every comment, every threat. We spoke to neighbors, and some quietly admitted they didn't agree with Karen, but were too afraid to speak up. That told me one thing. Karen wasn't just a complainer, she was a bully, and bullies thrive on silence. But we weren't going to be silent anymore. The tension kept building. One afternoon, Karen stood in the middle of the street, yelling at my son as he washed his car. She told him he was intimidating the children, that his vehicle was scaring families. Can you imagine that? A man who had protected children overseas was now being accused of scaring them in his own neighborhood. The injustice burned inside me, and I knew this story wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about respect. It was about honor. And it was about standing up when someone tries to trample on what's right. Because here's the truth. Karen thought she could erase my son's sacrifice with a pen and a complaint, but she underestimated us. She underestimated him. And most of all, she underestimated the power of truth. The battle with the HOA was heating up, and the next move Karen made, that's where everything changed. Karen was not done. No, she was only getting started. When the letters from the HOA didn't scare us, she decided to turn up the heat. She went door to door in the neighborhood, knocking on doors, telling anyone who would listen that my son's car was a threat to the community. She used words like dangerous, unstable, and frightening. And just like poison spreads through water, her words began to flow. Some neighbors ignored her. Some believed her, and some just wanted the drama to stop. But Karen, she thrived on the chaos. Every time we thought she couldn't sink lower, she did. She even went as far as calling the police one evening, claiming that my son's military vehicle was illegal to have parked on the street. The police came. They looked at the car, looked at the paperwork, and then looked at Karen. The officer shook his head, told her there was no issue, and drove away. But here's the thing. Even though we won that moment, Karen didn't stop. If anything, it only fueled her rage, because bullies don't like losing. The next HOA meeting was a nightmare. Karen stood up in front of everyone, waving pictures of my son's car like it was evidence in a crime. She shouted about property values, about community safety, about how we were setting a bad example. And then, with a smug smile, she pushed for a vote. She wanted the HOA to fine us until we either removed the vehicle or moved out. Can you imagine sitting there, hearing someone talk about your child that way? My son had been through war zones, but sitting in that meeting, watching Karen spit venom at him, it cut deeper than any bullet. His hands clenched, his jaw tightened, but he stayed calm, because that's who he is. When it was our turn to speak, my son stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He spoke with quiet strength. He told them about his service, about why that car mattered, about how it wasn't just a machine, it was a memory, a reminder of everything he'd endured and everything his friends had sacrificed. And when he spoke, the room fell silent. For a moment, even Karen had no words. But silence doesn't last long when someone thrives on noise. The next day, another letter arrived. This time, the HOA threatened legal action. They claimed my son's vehicle violated community standards and had to go. That was the breaking point. We had tried to be patient. We had tried to be respectful. But now, it was time to fight back with more than words. We contacted a lawyer. We showed him the letters, the harassment, the baseless claims. And you know what he said? He said Karen and the HOA were standing on thin ice. They couldn't just target us because of one woman's personal grudge. They couldn't erase a veteran's rights with empty threats. So we fought back. We filed a complaint. We demanded proof of any rule that said my son's car was not allowed. And guess what? They couldn't produce one, because there was no rule. Karen had twisted the system, and the HOA had followed her lead. When the truth came out, it hit them like a hammer. The HOA backed down, realizing they were walking into a legal disaster. The fines disappeared. The threats stopped. And Karen? Well, she wasn't happy. She never apologized. She never admitted she was wrong. But her power was broken. The day the case was closed, my son stood by his vehicle, the sun setting behind him, and for the first time since he came home, I saw real peace in his eyes. Not because the fight was easy, not because justice was handed to us, but because he stood his ground. That car still sits in front of our house. And every time I see it, I don't just see a vehicle. I see resilience. I see sacrifice. I see a young man who gave everything for his country and refused to let a neighbor take his dignity away. And here's the lesson. Sometimes, the real battles don't happen overseas. They happen right at home, in our neighborhoods, in the small fights that test our patience, our strength, and our character. Karen thought she could win with complaints and threats. But she forgot one thing. Respect cannot be demanded. It has to be earned. So, to anyone listening to this, remember this. Never let someone's ignorance erase your truth. Never let a bully's voice silence yours. And never, ever forget that what you've been through, what you've earned, and what you've sacrificed has value, no matter what anyone says. Backhand index pointing right. If you felt the fire in this story, share it with others. Stand up for yourself, stand up for your family, and stand up for what's right. Because sometimes the smallest battles carry the biggest lessons. Don't let anyone take away your pride, your respect, or your freedom.